and safety point of view. Okay, thank you everybody for coming along on a Tuesday night in Havelock North. It's great to see you here. This is our third event that we've had in our roadshow, starting with Holleigh and going all the way to Gore. We have a series of town hall meetings followed and incorporating a series of university and Crown Research Institute meetings as well, representing the two areas, R&D and the industry. But before we get started, I'd like to call on the Mayor Sandra to come up and welcome us, and then we'll get started. Thank you, Sandra.
Good evening, everyone. Richard, and can we welcome you to Hastings and everybody who is working in the hemp industry or thinking about working in the hemp industry, a very warm welcome to you too. I first saw hemp growing in a paddock down Middle Road with the team here, with Levi and Gabriel, and went and saw this incredible product being made into building blocks. But to see this crop growing and see the significance of it in that time was a really, really exciting and innovative product that we knew had enormous potential. We didn't know where it was going to go or how it's going to get there, and getting through government authorities isn't easy. But we see tonight a range of incredible hemp products that 5 years on, we are developing and expanding the industry. When I think that, that we're taking hemp oil for our health and wellbeing products every day, if you told me that 5 years ago, I would have said, I don't think that's right, So what we're seeing now is more and more opportunities, and I think the environmental wellbeing of what hemp does in terms of our waterways, nitrates, and we have the Balanced Farming Awards on tonight in Hastings, my deputy mayor's there, and so just thinking about all of these environmental well-beings of hemp and what it can do and what it will do. So this is an innovative and exciting product, and we're really excited about it being in Hawke's Bay and growing from the probably 200 hectares we have at the moment to more than 1,000 hectares in the next 3 to 5 years. So this is we are really, really passionate in Hastings about our primary sector, and when I think about the Infometrics report just last week, Hawke's Bay is the highest performing region in the last year, and that's all on the back of our primary sector. So that's the food and fibre we produce in Hawke's Bay, and the wellbeing of getting that and paying premium prices through the export market. So we're in a very, very strong position in Hawke's Bay. We are Great Things Grow here, Richard, as you've got the T-shirt, and we have, it's making sure that we've got our strong water supply, our good soils protected, and looking after our community so we can keep growing great things in our soils here. So for those who are new to the industry, all the very best. For those of you who have been in the industry for a while, we look forward to the innovation, the development that will happen, and I'm excited about seeing all the opportunities that hemp will bring as a fibre product for us, for Hawke's Bay and for our Aotearoa. So it's great to have you here and spreading the word, and the more people we can get using these incredible products and understanding their value and how government recognises them in the future for all sorts of medicinal areas is also very, very exciting for us to watch this development. We need strong lobbyists, we need strong people to make sure they're advocating for the product, and then we'll see this whole industry grow enormously. So no mai haere mai, very warm welcome to you all. Kia ora.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and touching on so many things in that just that short time, where hemp can really fit in that space. It's quite interesting, and you'll see what I mean by that as we go through the presentation this evening. We have a range of speakers today. I want to get us started and just talk about a little bit about the history and explain how we've got to where we are, and then we'll be going on to Nicky from the Food Innovation Network, Holleigh from Harvest to Hand, and then Gareth from Farmlands. And then I'll come back and sort of talk to you about the why we should be doing this and the why you should be wanting it to do it in your business plans as well. But that's just a rough idea of what we're going to run through tonight, and we'll have a session of questions and answers at the end, which is, you know, a really good opportunity to dive in and sort of unpack some of the topics that we've discussed. So the panellists will join us up at the front, and we'll go on and answer your questions from them. So just to look at the hemp and the history, the NZHIA, we started in 1997. It was started by an awesome guy called Matt McIntosh in the Catlins Valley in Owaka. And he got us all sort of together and formed an incorporated society in March 1997. And at the time, there was a moratorium on talking to the government about anything to do with cannabis. So we had to sort of raise their awareness. And that's why the book on the left, the 5-minute guide to industrial hemp, was produced for a quick read, sort of get people up to speed. So that was sent out to all the MPs. And with that, and a lot of work from other people in the industry as well, we got the moratorium lifted, had a conversation with them, and they set up a framework to allow trials to happen from 2000 to 2005. And then we got the regulations in 2006. The document on the right, just to show a bit of history, you know, sort of 20 years later, was written last year by Dr. Nick Marsh, and again with AgMart funding, which was, they've been very supportive of the industry. It goes into depth about how we could really realise some of the economic potential out of industrial hemp, and it really speaks to some amazing opportunities that the food, fibre and health sectors present. This is just to acknowledge that we are dealing with cannabis. We're low THC industrial hemp, so we don't have any drug of any particular note, so we're not going to be used as recreational. The part on the right shows the cross-section of a stem, and you'll see those woody bast fibres on the outside and this woody inner pith in the middle, which is hurd or could be called shiv as well. And that distinction will be useful for when we get into the fibre section, because that inner part is useful in the construction materials, particularly hempcrete. And of course, you would have known about the hemp seeds, the hemp seed oils that people have been using for many years. So just to go back in time, and I'm only going to, you know, I'm not going to go all the way back to ancient history and Mesopotamia when it was, you know, being used and that sort of thing. But if we consider how much tonnage of hemp was on board those sailing ships and the sails, the uniforms they wore, the caulking that they sealed the ships with, the oil in their pens, you know, all of those things had a hemp connection. And, you know, when the people say the original Levi's were made of hemp, well, there would have been a lot of canvas running around those times. So it makes sense that it would have been. But the rope and cordage, whenever I mention hemp to most people, that's what comes to mind. But there's also acknowledgement back in the 1800s, right up until the early 1900s, that cannabis tinctures and medicines were one of the most popular medicines in the American pharmacopoeia at the time. So, you know, this is not new. You know, you'll look at some of those names, Park Davis, L.O. Lilly, you know, these companies exist now. So this is what they were doing 120 odd years ago. And, you know, it really does speak to the fact that cannabis has been connected with us and been used by humans for such a long time. I just wanted to acknowledge the study of Kimergy, because this is using agricultural raw materials to make composites and plastics. The chap on the left is George Washington Carver. He was one of the people that helped to understand how this could happen. And this was again in the early 1900s. So people were making plastics out of reusable agricultural waste at the time. Chap on the left, not very clear, but that's Henry Ford. And you can Google Henry Ford's plastic car, and you'll see the car that was made in the 1920s. And he's hitting it with a sledgehammer there, and it's just bouncing back. Now, he was a hemp farmer, but also he was a soya farmer. So that car, the hemp people will say it's all made of hemp, but it's more than likely made of a combination of agricultural waste from the soya and hemp plantations that he was running. So, billion-dollar crop. We're not the first people to call it a billion-dollar crop. This is the Poplar Mechanics article in the middle. This is 1938. And the reason why that article has been written is because there was a guy called G.W. Shetland who developed a decorticator, which is a mechanical way of processing the fibre to split it up so they could get the long bast fibres for their cordage and their fabrics and their apparel, and leave this herd for animal bedding and other uses. That Poplar Mechanics article is where the 25,000 uses of hemp comes from, because in it states 25,000 uses, everything from cellophane to dynamite, all made out of industrial hemp. The article on the left is worthy of a mention. It's Bulletin 404, issued by the United States Department of Agriculture. That's where people get the meme that hemp can produce 4 times as much pulp as a forest can do in the paper industry. So that was something back in 1904 that they knew about. And then along came the Marijuana Tax Act. So this was in 1937. So no one told the popular mechanics people at this time that the year before, under a taxation issue, it was industrial hemp, cannabis, hemp was all outlawed under the Mexican slang word marijuana. So it was taxed out of existence, and then it was really picked up on as the most, the war on drugs, reefer madness, and that continued. The people that were involved in prohibition found a new enemy, no longer alcohol, but now the marijuana plant, which, as we know, is also cannabis, which is also hemp, low THC industrial hemp. About face, during the war, 1944, they were running out of cordage and for their webbing and their parachutes and all the uniforms and things like that. So the newsreel Hemp for Victory was put out, and every movie that you went to, that newsreel would run before the main feature, and every patriotic farmer, American farmer, had to grow 1 acre of hemp for the war effort. And the gentlemen, the soldiers down below are protecting the seed for that crop to be grown. What people do know about the American side, but the Germans also had a hemp primer that asked for the same thing, patriotic Germans to grow hemp for the war effort because they needed the fibre. And they were using a male and a female plant as the characters in their cartoon strip. And then, of course, the war ended and reefer madness, the war on drugs picked up. But it all culminated in 1961 at the UN when they formed the Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs. And because so many countries were using industrial hemp at the time, they recognised it in this convention. In Article 28.2, this convention shall not apply to the cultivation of the cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes, fibre and seed, or horticultural purposes. So that means that we can have an arable industry, we can have a horticultural industry using low THC industrial hemp. And then, as we've discussed, after the trials ended, we get to 2006 and we have the Misuse of Drugs Act. Our hemp regulations have to sit under an act. So we're under the Misuse of Drugs Act because of the word cannabis in there. So it's an unfortunate situation where the Ministry of Health have to actually be the administrators of our regulations. But the objective is important here because it's enabling legislation. They wanted to enable an industry. And all these conversations around THC, THCA, CBD, they were all had in 2000 to 2006. And we know that because we were at the table at the time. Mac was at the table. And Tony Vanderlam, who's our government liaison officer, was at the table representing MPI at the time as well. So we finally get the regulations and we can get started in the industry, and then we can start celebrating the hemp seed, because in 2018, the law changed again to allow us hemp seed for human consumption. And of course, the Kanapu brand there is probably the most well-known in the Bay here. But a bit of a homage also to Midlands, who were there right at the beginning. They've been trialling industrial hemp since we first started in those trials before the regulations. And then more recently, we've got Hemp Connect. And on the bottom right, that's the Brothers Green, again, Christchurch with their hempy bar. Just back to the fibre. So just to think of the fibre uses, we were looking at Henry Ford's car, so I thought I'd put up another couple of car shots, the Lotus on the left, the Mercedes. The reason why it hasn't really taken off quicker in the case of the Mercedes is that we couldn't get enough scale. We couldn't produce enough fibre for them to make all the components they want, because over in Europe, they've got to look at the full life cycle analysis. So they've got to consider the disposal of their products and the manufacturing of them. So it's a different way of looking at their products, but it does end up with a more sustainable approach. Our house in the bottom right is in New Plymouth about 10 years ago, and the one on the left is a different way of making the hempcrete, in the sense it's using a block, and those woody structures, which keep it like a Lego, help to maintain a structural element to it as well. This one was inside cover of the 5-minute guide, and it's always worthwhile putting up there, even if it's a holding slide, because it just speaks to that huge number of commercial opportunities that industrial hemp has, from the seeds to fibre and those health products in all sorts of manufacturing processes. So I'm just going to hand over to the next speaker now, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the why after that presentation. So, Nicky, hopefully.
Thanks, Richard. Kia ora koutou. My name's Nicky Solomon, and I'm kind of wearing two hats tonight. I work for half-time for the New Zealand Food Innovation Network, and I'm also holding the space for a regional food and fibre program while the region sets up its new economic development agency. So I'm really delighted to be able to be here. Thank you, Richard, and talk to you about opportunities for food and beverage as it relates to hemp. So hope I know what I'm doing here, standing in the right place. So just a quick introduction to the Food Innovation Network. Essentially, it's a government-funded open access network of facilities. We have facilities all over the country. You'll see we have no blob in Hawke's Bay. So I am sort of a free-range representative of the network, and my job is to work with any businesses that are interested in developing or innovating in the food and beverage space and try to be helpful in whatever way I can, which might mean working with the network, or it might mean other information or introducing people to whatever it is that they need. So it's a lovely role to have because I get to be helpful, and we are, as luck would have it, we will hopefully soon have a facility here called Food East, which will be supporting food and beverage innovation. So that'll be fabulous. And just stop me as we go if I'm going too fast. So I guess if we think about the journey from, you have an idea and through to actually making a product and selling it and hopefully exporting it, we fill a space here, but obviously we're part of a much bigger network of supporting entities. And again, there's incredible amount of support out there for businesses that want to innovate in the food and beverage space. So we can help with connections to whoever might be helpful. So that's just a bit of an introduction to me and what I do. With respect to the food industry, I guess we know that we do well in food in New Zealand. And as Sandra said, in Hawke's Bay, we're just amazingly well set up to grow great stuff and turn it into stuff and send it offshore. But as a country, we tend to play a bit too much in the commodity space and not really adding as much value and keeping the value in the country as we could. So the opportunity is to move from commodity up the value chain and keep more jobs here and more value here. And it seems to me that there's tons of opportunity with hemp in that space. And this is interesting. The stats are a couple of years old, but I guess we know that the food and beverage industry's done well through COVID. So I'd suspect it's not, still growing. I thought it was interesting. It's really hard to read. I know that this dark green blobby bit, that's innovative foods, right? So that's kind of where we want to be. And those blobs are not substantially growing in that space. I think the numbers are sort of 0.89, 0.9, 1.01. So I feel like, again, we've got an opportunity to really drive that innovative stuff. So again, this is a little bit out of date, but I think it's clear that the trend towards plant-based food and beverage is growing. And I think that hemp ticks a lot of boxes for people. And I think that I've been working in the food industry my whole career, and there's some enduring kind of mega trends that really haven't changed a great deal in that time. And these would be the ease and convenience. People are busier and busier. They're looking for fast, easy ways to eat. Functional food, people really want to look after their health and well-being. So if you can eat something and be healthier, feel better for it, all the merrier. And people still want indulgence. We all need our treats, and especially midwinter, it's nice to indulge. And this is probably a really growing one, this idea of conscious consumption, that people are more and more aware of what they're purchasing, its impact on the environment, and want to be able to make decisions that they feel good about. So my sense is that if we can play in these spaces, in particular more than one, we're in a good place. So I thought this was an interesting slide in that you know, obviously these are drivers for growth in hemp-based food, but I feel like it kind of is missing kind of the big one, which is really about this conscious consumption. And this is pulled from a, excuse me, from a Mintel report, which projecting forward to 2030, what are people going to be looking for? And basically they're saying that we want to be able to buy things that we feel good about buying. And so we'll support businesses that are doing the right thing, leading change, making us feel better about our purchase decisions. And then again, we will be prioritising plants in our diet because of our increasing awareness of the impact on the environment. And it feels to me like we're at a bit of a tipping point in the sense that in the last couple of years, I think the scepticism about climate change has vanished, better late than never, and that we're now aware that we have a real tension around how we're going to feed this burgeoning population without completely killing the planet. And New Zealand is really well placed to capitalise on that. It's not easy, but again, it seems to me that hemp has a great environmental story and a health story, and we can really weave these things together. So I thought this was a really neat example in that the Chair Sisters have pulled out 4 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and said, I think there's like 12 of them or something. So no one business is probably going to be able to tick all those boxes, but they said, okay, we're going to highlight these 4 in our business and we're going to focus on those. And, you know, interestingly, they've got a hemp-based beverage, Hero and Hemp. And so in terms of the New Zealand story, we grow great stuff. We're really good at growing stuff. We're not very good at pulling it apart into its component pieces. We just don't have the scale manufacturing-wise. We're quite good at formulating and putting those ingredients back together and making innovative food. So I guess it's, you know, to Richard's sort of purpose of this roadshow is about we need to get investment into the industry so that we can really make the most of what this opportunity is. And it seems to me, as Richard and I were talking last week, that there's not often that there's an opportunity, you know, this has only been an opportunity since 2018 for hemp-based food, kind of once in a lifetime, my lifetime, that, you know, something really new. This is a really emerging opportunity that we could really grip up. So we know that there is a real drive towards plant-based milk, and I'm a bit sad that this doesn't feature our own locally made boring oat milk, but the images are done before they were around. But we are limited in New Zealand with our UHT manufacturing capability. Luckily, we have 2 massive plants here, but it's still really, really difficult because of the lack of stainless steel that we need to make this stuff. And so I guess I just would encourage us all to think widely about what we could do with hemp. And, you know, the story is endless. Within the Food Innovation Network, we've worked on lots of these sorts of products. And yeah, it feels like you can just do just about anything. And also to think a little bit more laterally, we have the ability to pull all those cool bits out of something. So the health and wellness story can be told by pulling out the active component and then formulating it in a whole different way. So I really liked, this was one that I found just Googling around, and I love this quote: hold the kefir and coconut water, put down the turmeric latte. The biggest trend in health drinks is hemp-based everything. And so this is like a sparkling water with all of the benefit of hemp. And so just thinking about how we might innovate beyond what we see in front of us. And this is just FYI, really. Callaghan has done a massive piece of work on hemp and how you might go on that journey. So if anyone's interested in really digging into that, I can hook you up. That's a bit more about it. And I sort of like this quote, really, that the rate of change is exponential. And so we need to be kind of, it's really difficult to imagine what things will be like in another 100 years, but we kind of need to keep raising our eyes above the parapet and gripping up the opportunity. And yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. Sorry, I felt like I put a little Oh yeah, sorry, that's another quote from one of my favourite books.
And okay, thank you very much for that, Nicky. And it's yeah, you know, you're right. This is going to be an amazing journey when more and more people discover that we've created a, you know, we have access to a whole new raw material, or in case of food, a whole new raw ingredient. So some exciting times ahead. So we'll call on our next speaker, which will be Harvest to Hand. So Holleigh, would you like to come up?
Hello, I'm Holleigh. I'm one of the co-founders of Harvest to Hand. So we established our brand down in Tikakino in August 2020, so mid-COVID. Alongside, the other co-founders is my husband Dylan and my father Ian. So when I came back, just a brief overview of how Harvest to Hand started. When I came back from overseas, Dad was growing hemp and we were contract growing for other hemp companies around New Zealand. And I really liked what I saw in hemp. I loved all the nutritional benefits that hemp had to offer. I have like a really holistic way of looking at food. Like I like the functional, what you were saying about the functional benefits that food has to offer, instead of reaching for something synthetic, reaching for something that's real and wholesome. And so that's how Harvest to Hand sort of came about. I wanted to sort of extend what we had on the farm and produce our own food products. And I thought Harvest to Hand and hemp was a really great place to start. So our full range that we started with is the hemp seed oil, the hemp hearts, and hemp protein and hemp flour. And then I will go into all of those and how we produce those later on. And then also some other products that we've sort of brought out along the way. That's us there. And just, yeah, basically why we built Harvest to Hand. So just a brief overview really quickly of what I'll be talking about today was just the hemp plant and how we grow it. Hawke's Bay is a great place for growing a ton of food. We grow a lot of plants like grains and cereals, also a lot of produce on the farm as well. So we've got great soils for it. I'll just run through the nutritional benefits that all of our products sort of have to offer. And touch on the environmental side of hemp and how great it is for the environment, and then how we like to utilise our products as well. So really briefly, those are sort of the main 4 components of the plant itself. When we plant the hemp seed, we are utilising the hemp fibre and the hemp seed. We don't essentially use the leaf itself. Personally, I don't know if other brands do, but the leaf itself just drops onto the ground and gets mulched back up into the soil, which is also just a great natural fertiliser for the ground. The hemp shell, we also don't essentially use. It's got to be dehulled off the seed, because you've got to sort of obtain a license to be able to handle the hemp seed when it's got the shell on, which we do, but not the everyday consumer holds a license for that. So that's why you end up with the hemp heart that is dehulled. So we cultivate the ground like any other crop that we have. We disc the soil up, which breaks it all down, power harrow it, which makes it into a soft bed for the seed, and then go ahead and plant the seed. It's a pretty easy crop to grow, essentially. It is a weed. You don't need to spray it outgrows any other weeds, especially the, I was going to say the brand, but the type of seed that we grow is called Hempulti. So it's extremely high variety hemp seed or hemp plant that we grow. Outgrows all the other crops, all the other weeds, and it loves sunshine. So we usually plant around December, and then usually harvest around April. So it's sort of in the ground for about 3.5, 4 months. We are on bird watch when it comes to that last month, because they tell us when the seed is ready to harvest, when it's ripe. It's full of protein and the birds love it. And it loves its sunshine hours and its water too, which we've got a lot of down on the farm, which is great. Moving on to the products that we produce. So once we harvest the seed, it usually has a moisture level of about 19%, because that's usually when the birds come flocking, which is actually too high. So we put the hemp seed through our drying silo, which brings the moisture level down to 8%, and then it's ready to go and get processed. So you've got the hemp seed, which has still got the hull on it, which goes down and gets processed and dehulled, or cold pressed, to get your hemp seed oil. Your hemp seed oil is incredibly high in your omegas 3 and 6. It's actually got the optimal ratio of those omegas, ideally, for what your body needs to utilise those omegas, and so you get the benefits from them. And then we've also got the hemp heart, which is just the seed dehulled, and that the seed itself is in its natural form. So you're getting all your omegas, your protein and your fibre, and there's a few sort of floating minerals in there, like your zinc and magnesium and things like that. The seed itself is a complete plant protein source. So therefore, you've got all your amino acids in there, which is very rare when it comes to plant proteins. And you've also got all your essential amino acids in there, which are amino acids that your body can't produce by itself. Therefore, it needs to be utilised some way through your diet. And again, there's not a lot of plant-based proteins out there where you can get all of those things in one. And that's the same with your omegas too. Like, there's not many plant-based high omega seeds out there. There's your chia seeds and your flax seeds, but they're actually not as readily available as your hemp seed is. So it's because it's got that optimal ratio that your body can actually utilise and absorb those omegas straight away, which is great for skin care, your brain function. I don't know if you've heard about omega-3 before, but just all those great things that come with it. And then your fibre, which is great for your gut health. And that's in still in the hemp hearts, but also in the hemp protein powder. So going back to our hemp heart, that's cold pressed into your hemp seed oil, which is a high dosage of all your omegas. And then you're left over with the hemp cake, which we then process into our hemp protein powder, which is then essentially really high in your protein and your fibre, but it's missing those omegas because we've just squeezed them out and put them into our oil. So our products sort of vary depending on what you want, whether you're looking for a high protein diet, or if you've got high inflammation, I'd be more inclined to point you in the direction of the oil. But it is quite astringent in taste. So if you find that the oil is too strong, we sort of push people towards the hemp hearts because they're quite subtle and nutty in flavour, and you can throw them in anything. It's a lot more versatile and easy to use. And we've also produced a hemp soap, which you can also see that was a hemp soap up there. So you can have that hemp oil. Again, those omegas are great for inflammation. And you can either have that topically or orally. And so that's why we're just producing the different products. Again, for people's needs and wants, because someone doesn't want to have a tablespoon of hemp oil, you know, to help with their inflammation. They might just want to put it on topically. Just a little touch on the environmental benefits. It's one of the most sustainable crops in the world. It is breathing in that CO2 in the air, even more than what our forests are. Again, no sprays. You don't have to put any of those chemicals or sprays on the ground that leach into our waterways. It's incredibly fast growing. It looks after itself. And again, you can utilise the whole plant. We don't utilise the whole plant, but we have been using the stalks and the seeds. So once we go through and harvest our crop, you're left over with the stalk, which we then grow up and bale essentially. And that goes down to our new plant down in Christchurch, hopefully to be processed in the coming years. And how we like to use our products, we sort of think that we can replace our extra virgin olive oil and use hemp oil instead. It's got so much more omega-3 and less saturated fat than extra virgin olive oil. So we're using it in our dressings. It does have a smoke point of about 140 degrees. So essentially, if you cook with the oil, you're breaking down all those beautiful omegas, and you're actually losing all the health benefits that it has to offer. If you're sauteing, you could put it on right at the end, or your pastas and risottos and things like that. Dips, you can use the hemp hearts instead of pine nuts, and instead of olive oil, use the hemp seed oil and make your own pesto or hummus or anything like that. I think people are too scared or don't know how, just too scared to use hemp oil like an olive oil, but you can replace it essentially. And because it's like the hemp hearts are so sort of subtle and nutty, they can go on anything, you know, your porridges in the morning, can sort of swing that sweet or savoury way. Throw it on salads, throw it in your pastas and risottos. I find in the industry at the moment, it's all about educating people that there's no THC in our hemp. We have to test it to have a license. It's sort of just getting people to try the product and not be scared to use it, because it's got great benefits. And yes. That was a really brief, quick overview of Harvest Hand. I've sort of thrown at you the whole process that we sort of go through from seed to product, through growing or anything like that. But please don't be afraid to ask any questions at the end, because I feel like I skipped through a lot of that. Thank you.
And thank you, Holleigh. This made me quite hungry, actually, to be honest. Just great to see a company that's taking the going up that value chain, as Nicky's highlighting, moving away from that commodity into those markets. But and it is getting better. You know, going to the markets, it's a lot less. I have the question asked of me, can I smoke that hat? You know, it just doesn't happen as much now. So it is moving towards it. But once it takes off, it will be really quite an interesting space, this food space for sure. So we'll go on to our next speaker now. That we're just going to have our third speaker come up, Gaz from Farmlands. Here he comes. Yeah, which one?
Good way. As long as it doesn't.
No. As long as you're standing in the right place, Gaz. You're right.
I will stand in the right place. Right. Good evening. Hi. I've got a really bad habit of not being able to say no to people. So thank you, Richard, for the opportunity to say yes and come and speak this evening. Secondly, importantly, I'm quite inquisitive, and I don't like actually having to say no to ideas. So there's no such thing as a silly idea, right? It's silly if we don't thrash it out, explore it, consider it, and then either park it up or move forward with the idea. So, and again, one of the really enjoyable things I get to do in my day job, because I do some really boring stuff, but some of the really good stuff is meeting people, understanding their operation, understanding their business, and understanding what that new opportunity could be and how it fits into what they're doing. But I also feel as land usage change is considered and possibly implemented, it's a really steep learning curve for us to be a part of that and almost be one step ahead of it too, with answers or scenarios when growers come and say, right, I want to try this. Okay, we better do some really quick homework and find out about that. So to understand the new crop or usage and be able to provide accurate and sound trusted advice is to proceed, and equally valuable is to not proceed with an idea either, with that original intention, but give us the opportunity to modify, remodel and rethink. Right. Excuse me for reading notes. I went to the dentist today and feel a bit average, and this whole COVID thing's really fuzzied my brain a little bit, so bear with me. So like other new crops that I've explored for other growers, the most valuable part is connecting them with people who understand the crop, who've grown the crop and who've got history with the crop as well. So with any new venture, I'd strongly recommend, if there is one, to reach out to that industry body, that industry association, join, get involved, be known, get amongst it and reap the knowledge and rewards of collective intelligence in that field. And that's how I met Richard a few years ago. So the basic plant anatomy tells us that the plant is a plant, and I'm generalising, but essentially on a structural level, they are the same. There's roots in the ground, transport system within to move nutrients around to and from leaves. We'll grow either some fruit, some flowers, or some seeds, and we'll harvest that and start that process again all over next year. Which can lead growers into considering new crops, thinking, well, if I can grow X, why can't I grow Y? Is it because nobody's done it in the region in a commercial volume? It's not viable, or is it? What's the purpose? What's the need? Or is there something missing from our domestically produced food and fibre current offerings? So we've had growers, our shareholders and our growers approach us and show interest in industrial hemp, which made us look within our own agronomy, technical and field teams to say, well, hey, hands up amongst that team, who knows how to grow industrial hemp? Not too many hands went up. So we began with some Googling, and the side note is, how good is Google? There is a heap of good and equally not so good information that needs to be sifted through to work out what's useful. There's almost too much information, and it does take some time to try and understand what good looks like. So, again, I feel really fortunate that I work with a business that allows time to read and research. But it's a bit different to days of old where we'd have to go down to a library where you get textbooks and you read scientific papers. As agronomy keyboard warriors, we can access and reach out the stuff, the globe over, and then try and bring it back and New Zealandize it, if you like, and take the crops that are grown offshore and then try and bring it back to a New Zealand condition and say, well, simply because they can grow in Canada, can we grow it here? If it grows in barley, can we grow it here? What's the difference? What's the kicker? Like transferring crop data from the US or a European environment, or more interestingly, the field that I sit in is deciphering active ingredients in crop protection or nutritional products to say, well, if this is the product offshore with active ingredient X and Y, what have we got? What are we missing? Or how do I procure those things to bring them back? So bringing it back to the generalisation I made earlier about plants being plants, there's two parts to this puzzle. Is firstly, can we grow it? And secondly, what are we going to do with it? So it's business 101, right? If it's not needed, there's no point growing it. What's our why? So we'll always start with a desktop study, and we'll understand these particular plants' basic needs and wants. What are its pitfalls? Where's the catch? Is it climatical? Is it based around pest and disease pressures? Potential proximity of other crops in the region that may have a negative effect on our new crop. And we'll start to build a program for consideration based on reviews of global and if there's any available onshore work, and a study into local geographical and climatical influences. The new crop also needs to be planet positive as well, rather than contribute to resource drain. It may, for example, require high inputs of water or a particular fertiliser type, both of which are under reasonable pressure presently. So the ability to procure that input may be at current or future risk, hence putting your future crop considerations at risk as well. And then the all-important why is, what are we going to do with it? How do we harvest it? How do we process it? Is it part of the end product, or is it the end product itself once we harvest it? And is there a way to create regional value add to the grower, the community, and the region? The bigger picture is outside the farm gate, and this will create employment and development within a region, and how will others benefit from it? So, and that brings us to the really big need, which is what do we actually need to get this to work? Is it infrastructure to build a new crop industry? Is there the ability to leverage similar existing crops and use their resources and intellectual property to be able to run faster with a new crop being considered? A former colleague of mine called that steal with pride. It's possibly not the best term, but he's right. I mean, why recreate pieces of mutually beneficial work if there's an opportunity to work closer with others? Of course, comes the fun part, actually getting to the ground and giving it a go. So I'll run through a couple of examples that we've been involved with in shape or form, but the common theme that runs through each one is the ability to harness and channel the collective knowledge, enthusiasm, and ambition of a group for an outcome. So when considering the new crop, it's pretty vital, I feel, to have people in the team that will say no, that will challenge the group, hopefully in a constructive way, to ensure that best interest and continued focus are kept in mind. Ultimately, the grower and the farm are at the centre of all decision making. After all, the risk is theirs to continue and win or to continue and not succeed. And if we challenge constructively, it allows for more robust discussion and thought, leading to better and more considered outcomes. Sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in the excitement of something new. But I'm a planner, I'm a thinker, that's where I slot in amongst the team. I'm not here to be negative and disprove an idea, but just to ensure that all involved are aware and mindful of the countless moving parts involved in a major decision that will affect the current and future state of their business. And surround yourself with people who aren't afraid to ask questions either. Like, we probably all don't understand. So please explain more on point A or point B. I don't understand this. Guaranteed others will be having the same thoughts that we are having. So this was home for me. This is Tikakino. We were fourth generation sheep and beef farming down there. Towards the end of my old man's farming career, he'd started thinking about different things. He was trying timber, he was thinking about cropping. The land at the back of our farm was suitable for grapes. My younger brother and I were both involved in pit fruit production locally as well. And Dad opened the farm up to us and said, why not plant pit fruit? My younger brother and I both felt we were too young, that we weren't experienced enough or knowledgeable enough to move forwards with that. So we parked it up, and it eventually sold into a dairy farm conversion. But tell you what, fast forward to now, and I really wish we'd been bolder and taken that chance. So there was the opportunity lost. Peanuts in Dargaville. So project initially conceived by Kaipara Kai in conjunction with Northland Inc. to consider high value horticultural crops for their region. Timed amongst the past few years of a disrupted global supply chain, well-known brand of peanut butter in New Zealand, Pix, was looking for ways to find solutions to secure their supply chain and bring it closer to home. So similar to other scenarios, desktop work was done. We worked with partners such as Plant and Food, local consultants and growers who were really keen to give it a go. The difference with peanuts here was that the need already existed. This was being market driven by an end user of the ingredient, looking for growers to be a part of this new project. People power and collective knowledge led to a small harvest in year one. I think there was 4 jars that were produced that sold on TradeWe for really good prices for a charity, which was great. But produced an amazing result of this can be done and was green-lighted to continue. So it now has its own dedicated project manager from Northland Inc. And they've gone as far to increase production area, expand to other areas, and exploring the implementation of specialist machinery. So we're watching that industry grow. We had a kiwifruit grower from up in the other bay make contact a few years ago after having been exposed to PSA and the risk it posed to their monocultural planted business. The question was asked, why can't I grow apples in the Tauranga region? Now, just because everybody plants kiwifruit doesn't mean you can't grow something else. But why does everybody grow kiwifruit and not apples? So they had some really neat things in their back pocket were working for them. They had a highly transferable skill set. Back to my plants being plants generalisation again. They understood nutrition, they understood pest and disease, the ability to determine risk periods based off modelling and climatical information. So why not? Collectively, they built their team themselves, current growers of that variety from down here in Hawke's Bay, planted food again, and off they went. Planted 2.5 hectares in the middle of their kiwifruit orchard. Fast forward to now, and those trees look really great, doing really, really well. A changing climate lets us do different things. I went to a presentation a few years back on why climate change is a good thing and the positive things that it brought. It was controversial, but the presenter's point of view was that this point in time could not be changed. So we are where we are, but we had to learn to work with it. And that opened up new opportunities. So there are examples such as but not limited to, we grow bananas in Gisborne. There's pineapples and coffee growing up in Northland. There are different wine varietals now being considered for different regions. And an SFFF project in which I was involved with a few years back was a feasibility study of growing organic kiwifruit in Central Hawke's Bay. We know other horticultural crops grown in Central Hawke's Bay. I used to grow apples for Mr. Apple in Tikakino in a previous life. It was challenging, but proved it could be done. Fast forward to now, as the Bay of Plenty is running out of land, and we start to see kiwifruit being considered in different southern regions. So we've got kiwifruit, Whanganui, Taranaki, there's a block in Otaki that we know of. There's kiwifruit growers in the Nelson area. I think we're still a few years away from popping up in Cromwell, but who knows, as the map will tell us, the climate will change. There's a neat intergenerational project happening in Canterbury, in which they planted a trial orchard of different fruit and nut trees. So a real scattering of a heap of different things. But the idea was to work out what was better suited to the environment and then scale up the operation to create future employment, income and opportunity. So really long-term project, but a neat example of making an educated start to a future generation's success story. So this business's current structure allows them to not force this project to generate an income. They generate an income out of other parts of their business. But it's rather a commitment to the longevity of the fruit and the nut trees and the opportunity to observe them, adapt them, and to be part of their landscape. So that leaves us with a lot of questions around land usage change development and a lot of answers that we're looking for, which is a crucial part of the planning and development program by talking, listening, questioning and challenging plans. So in closing, I've been fortunate and privileged to be part of a number of projects throughout the country over the years, and it always blows me away, the level of skill, enthusiasm and commitment that growers have to give things a go and make things happen, overlaid with a cautionary business approach to everyone's economic sustainability and longevity. So I haven't specifically answered the why or how to alternative land uses in my short time this evening, but my takeaway message is please consider new options, surround yourself with friends, family, consultants, industry associations, other growers, plan and think, challenge and rethink, and find the option that doesn't just work for you, but excites you to do it. So being on the land is a really special thing. And we're all lucky to play a part in the primary industry in whatever part we play. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaz. So that you know, the last two speakers, isn't it, that we talked about the resilient supply chain, Gaz, and there's so many things to consider in that space, and learning from others, because we've got a new industry and there's no experts in this new industry. None of us know what ultimately we're all going to need to know. So we're all learning. So it's quite an exciting time to be involved in that space. And thank you again, Holleigh, for taking us through the journey of hemp seed as well. Those hemp seed nutritional aspects, that omega-3 and 6, that's great stuff. So I'm just going to talk about some of the whys. So thank you for the lead-in, Gaz. You know, I can't use resilient supply chains, and I'll have to stop. I'll have to take out Pix peanut butter as an example and things, but you know, it's all good. You know, well, there's plenty of other stories in the hemp industry. It's one of those ones. So why, for the pioneer industry, why do we want to get involved in this? And there's, you know, it's an economic opportunity, and it's an alternate land use, and it speaks to, you know, the perfect storm of consumer awareness wants sustainability, as Nicky was saying, you know, this conscious consumer. The environment definitely wants, you know, a little bit of help with climate crisis and things like that. And even the regulator, you know, even the government, they need to achieve their export targets. They've got a housing crisis. They've got quite a few issues going on, a health crisis coming up. You know, if people were healthy from eating hemp seeds, then they would need less medical treatment. If they were healthy because they were living in a hempcrete house, they wouldn't have as many, you know, free of mold and those sort of things. And respiratory issues would be, you know, alleviated in many cases. So these are all reasons why we need this to happen. Just wanted to throw in a couple of crop shots to keep you guys interested about industrial hemp. This one is in Taurua, Waikato. It's a fanola crop, so it's a very short crop compared to what you were describing, Holleigh. You know, the compulpi tends to be a lot higher. So this is specifically a seed crop, whereas those higher crops could be considered a dual crop, and hence the note about using the fibre. Here's an organic crop, nice one, I guess, you know, just for you, in the Manawatu, and this is care of Bill Quinn, and you know, that's a fence post in the front, so there's no problem with the yields coming out of that, and that's what makes it really interesting. This is a huge bioaccumulator. You know, this could be 20, 24 tonnes of wet biomass in a very short growing period, 3 to months. So let's talk about the farming, and you know, we're going to talk about the 4 sides or the 4 corners that we as the New Zealand hemp industry look to when we're describing the industrial hemp and the potential, and everything's underpinned by the farmers. Everything's, you know, related to the farmers, but they need to know what they're going to grow is going to be bought by somebody. So the people need to be in these other industries, be focused on giving the information and the spec, so we know what we're going to be producing. So then we know how it's going to have to be processed, and we're going to know how it has to be treated and harvested. And it always ultimately goes back to the breeding of the plant that we want to grow. So, but there's other reasons, in case people aren't aware, that don't relate to just the cash crop, and that's the phytoremediation. This huge bioaccumulator can soak up heavy metals, can bring, you know, help clean and condition soils. Now, we need a lot more New Zealand-specific research on this. And there's people like Kirsty Harkness, who's a member, she's on the board actually of the New Zealand Hemp Industries Association. She has a vineyard, and they're growing hemp in the interrows. And just in Blenheim, there's some sort of 30,000 hectares or something, which is in effect a monocrop, but they're finding when they're planting hemp, it's attracting beneficial biodiversity to the crop. And if it can help with mulch and things like that. So there's reasons why you could consider growing hemp without it actually being just to produce something. So that's an interesting opportunity as a break crop and alternate land use. And of course, you know, if we can produce a product like a construction material, then you are talking about sequestering CO2. So, you know, as an alternate land use for the farmer, it's definitely got something to be considered. And if we can get that supply chain happening that would help the farmer to actually make $1 out of it as well, then that's obviously got to be a good thing for the economy. This is just some hemp stats. You'll see from this table that the biggest areas that are grown are in Canterbury and South Canterbury. And the year, it sort of fluctuates year to year as well. A good example of that is actually Hawke's Bay on the 5th or 6th line down. 2019, 60 hectares, 9 the following year, and up to 89 the second year. That's because we've got sort of 1 or 2 major suppliers and they don't have to grow every year for their seed. This information we collect from an Official Information Act request for the Ministry of Health. And it also gives us some ideas about what's grown and how many licenses in each area. But if we now look at those other 3 corners that I described, which are the food, the fibre and the health industry, we'll start with the food, and it just picks up on a lot of the points that Holleigh was making, so which is great because I don't have to trawl back and say, is it omega-3, is it omega-6? It's just, so all of that's been sort of taken care of. But I would want to acknowledge that in 2018, the food law changed. We got hemp seed for human consumption, but at the same time, we lost hemp seed, the use of hemp seed in the animal industry. So we can't feed animals as the waste stream or the byproduct anymore, which was a bit of a blow at the time. But it does mean that the industry now has to focus on, well, if we can't sell it to animals, which is, you know, not great return anyway, what can we use it for? So a lot of, you know, new innovative thinking has happened around that. And the other big news in the space of hemp for food is there was an application to Food Standards Australia and New Zealand made last year to allow the use of hemp leaf sprouts and roots in the food. So we might not be limited to just hemp seed. We could be eating the leaf and the flowering tops as well, which would be quite a breakthrough moment. That application, it takes them a year before they actually open the case. So that case will be opened later this year, and then hopefully there'll be some consultation around that. But when we're talking about the seed, there's other things to consider as well. When you, especially for the oil, the association is really strong on trying to get best practice out there, and people need to be aware that heat, light and air are the enemies of this oil. You don't want to heat it up. It's not a frying oil, as Holleigh was saying, you know, it's more of a drizzle oil. But even when you're preparing it, you know, you've got to drive that moisture out because a bit of seed's going to make a bit of product. So if we want to make a high-grade oil and have a really successful industry, especially from an export point of view, we've got to be better than the best. So this has got to be really taken on board. You know, even when you're cold pressing, I know people that their cold press is in the dark, which makes sense because one photon of light will destroy 30,000 molecules in the oil. Now, it doesn't take much for a fluorescent light bulb and the sun to come in there while you're processing your oil. And that's why some people actually stand in the cupboard and in the wardrobe or whatever while they take their oil, because they're that serious about stopping the light coming in. So I can't stress that enough. Heat, light and air, because it's just going to make your product hit that PV, that peroxide value, and it's going to go rancid a lot quicker if you don't mitigate those 3 things. From a scaling of the industry, we want to go away from a supply chain. We want to be a value chain. We don't want to be a commodity. We need to go way up that list. We can't compete with the Canadians, the Chinese, and other countries that are coming online already. And some of those imported products are cheaper right now in our country. So we've got to have a homegrown label. We've got a grown in New Zealand sort of branding. We've got to tell our story better, speaking back to our first presenter, Nicky, from, you know, this whole ability to really weave industrial hemp into your story is going to offer so many opportunities in that marketing mix. But really to scale the industry, we're going to have to match that supply and demand. Because if we get that supply and demand out of sync, farmers will be growing and they'll be let down because no one wants to buy their product. That burns the farmer. They're not going to want to grow hemp again. So that's not going to work. But there's no point in growing a whole lot unless there's somebody that wants to buy that product. So we really need to develop those end markets. And this is where the whole value chain comes in, and the Crown Research Institutes that have been mentioned, the Food Innovation Network, the universities, they're all very engaged in looking at this as an industry. And they tend to, especially the Crown Research, tend to look at it as a cannabis industry because they do a lot of work in that medicinal cannabis space as well. But they are seeing the differences between industrial hemp and medicinal cannabis. And this goes all the way through. So it's got to be consumer-led. What do the consumers want? You know, you can come up with some, you know, there's a lot of great minds at these universities coming up with great things, but no one wants it. So we need to focus that energy. And this is why this tour is so important, to try and identify those industries where there's going to be a light bulb moment and they hear something about the value chain that goes, yes, that's a gap in that value chain. That's where I can fit in. I can make machines that can do decortication type work. I've got new product development ideas for a food product. Or I'm a testing lab, or I'm a support industry and a marketing industry that's going to help produce and distribute those products. Excuse me. So if we talk now to the fibre industry, which has probably got the most potential in a scale, if we can crack that construction industry, is a really good example of what would help meet that need for a massive end user, because we need a lot of processing in that value chain. You know, those stems have to be harvested, and they tend to be harvested if you're growing a fibre crop at a lot earlier stage, generally when the pollen's just starting to shed. That's your best time. Those male plants actually are your best plants for apparel fibre, but that's the best time to get the fibre out. Most of what we do, because we're growing for seed, is allow those stems to get a lot tougher and become a lot harder to process for fibre, because they have to hold up that seed crop. That said, though, there's a lot of applications for that type of fibre and textile as well. And it may be more into the geotextiles as opposed to a high technical quality fibre in the sense of the use of the composite and things like that. But we need to understand how all of this works in a New Zealand specific way. So we need a lot of R&D. You know, we need to understand how it rests, which is where we put the stems on the ground and let the dew break down that lignin and pectin sort of glue that holds everything together, so that decortication process can continue. The decortication itself needs work. I mean, we're still doing the hammer mill action, which is, you know, fine for whatever use you have in mind for those particular end products. But, you know, people overseas are starting to look at ultrasonics, you know, steam explosion. You know, not all of those things can be done in many countries, but the steam one, for example, Taupo might be suited for that sort of thing with their geothermal. So this is why we're looking at those regional capabilities. And obviously in Hastings, you've got some amazing growing areas, but you've also got the port. Sounds like you've got plenty of water, you know, and you've got a really good infrastructure around that food and the supply chain, the value chain in that food market. So the fibre may be of interest as a byproduct, but it could also be something of interest for some people in the industry, because there's people in the room here that have a lot of experience in using fibre in the construction side. And if we go back to the farming as well, Holleigh and her family are here. And there's some real good knowledge in that space. And I can't stress enough about the birds. If you're a farmer, those are going to be your biggest pests. But understanding pests and diseases has got to be a big part of what we do to future-proof our industry. So understanding those bugs and getting some science done in that space is very important. But so the fibre industry is a really exciting one because it has so many end users. We don't have a lot of automotive industry here, but we do have yachting. You know, there's a lot of kitchens being built. There's a lot of cabinetry. There's a lot of you know, refitting mobile homes and things like that. They all have great uses for composites. So what can we come up with in New Zealand? And if we consider that hemp is naturally anti-static, antifungarial, antimicrobial, you know, anti-static, stops 95% of the UV light. If people in the audience were coming from a, say, medical filter manufacturer and they heard that, they would have to say, wow, I want that fibre in my product. You know, I want to use that in my sanitary product for the ladies. I want to use that in my bedding for the hospitals. All of those things, we need these light bulbs to go off the industry so they can really help us to create the end use, and that will drive the innovation and growth of the industry. So there's some amazing opportunities in that fibre space. And this is just a quick look at how that would break down into the various elements with the shivel, the herd, and the long, the bast fibres and that insulation material in this case. So what happened in the health industry? This is something that is potential of interest in the Bay. It's definitely of interest in the Gisborne and East Cape area because they have some amazing daylight nets, as does Nelson, as does Northland. This is a product that at the moment isn't really used too much in New Zealand because THC is a controlled drug and that's sort of okay because we're growing low THC industrial hemp and we have a license to do so. But if you start making products that contain other cannabinoids, particularly CBD, that's a prescription medicine. So now you've got the Misuse of Drugs Act to deal with and the Medicines Act to deal with. But there's a whole number of minor cannabinoids in that space that aren't controlled in the same way, that all have real potential to be investigated. 90 years of prohibition means most work in this sort of space is not being done. And yes, there's a lot of things happening in the States and Canada and Europe, and it feels like they're way ahead. And in some cases they are, but it doesn't take us long to catch up. I mean, in 100 years, if we're going to cover 20,000 years worth of progress, New Zealand's got a lot to offer into that space, especially with our R&D community. So there's a heap of things that we can do with those minor cannabinoids, and we should be looking at that because that will be growing a horticultural industry alongside our arable industry. Now, of course, it's not just cannabinoids that are in the plant, the terpenes and flavonoids. They've got some amazing opportunities to, as again, ingredients. Nicky may be right, we don't have much of an infrastructure to break them all down, but we've got a real good knowledge of how we can put them all back together. And there's some amazing people doing some amazing things in that process of extraction. So it's not going to be too long before we do have an industry that can take us through that whole value chain. And in the case of the NZHIA, we used to say food, fibre and medicine, but because medicinal cannabis has got its own scheme and it's got its own set of regulations, they're underway. You don't have to worry about that. There's a whole load of cash going into the medicinal cannabis industry. And they are going to do the clinical trials to make their medical claims to put on their labels. Now, they're also going to create a whole lot of GMP, good manufacturing practices facilities that hopefully will do toll processing for the health and wellness industry. So you could be in a space where you're looking at food and moving up from food to dietary supplements and then into functional foods, which is quite popular at the moment, another one of the mega trends that Nicky explained earlier this evening. Then you start getting into those natural health products and nutraceuticals, and then you get into medicine. So as long as you're not making medical claims, you're not a medicine. So if you're working that nutraceutical space, there's huge amounts of product development that could be done in there, and there's great export potential in that industry, and we're well suited for it. There's a lot of native botanicals in this space as well, and there's a lot of people that are really interested in developing that industry. So growing female plants, in some of the locations where I've just described where it would be useful, Northland, East Cape, Coromandel, Nelson to a lesser degree. These are industries where you've got a lot of illicit growers there that don't want a hemp industry coming in because of the pollen issue. So this could be a way of mitigating that. If the regulator opened their eyes and said, okay, let's turn this on, you would have $1 billion industry in a few years. And this is where those sort of comments come from, because I mentioned before about our investor report. Now, we've said in 2030 that there could be a $183 million seed industry and a $317 million fibre industry. Now, there's some regulatory steps that have to happen. Fibre to go off would require, some work in that construction space. But if they really moved it forward, as I said, about these female plants, this horticultural industry, you could add another 1.5 billion onto that. And that would be that nutraceutical market, a $2 billion market. And the SAPIA report that the NPI produced last year, June 2021, they even were struggling with this whole idea of how to value it. They came up with 4 scenarios, and it ranged quite widely from 11 to 774 million by 2030. They ended up with scenario 2, which is a $30 million industry, but we prefer our scenario 2, and we'll be shooting for a lot higher than their anticipation. But we're the enthusiastic bunch, aren't we? So if we take on board what Gaz was saying about the thoughtful, the planning process, the questioning, if we get that right, we can avoid a whole lot of issues for ourselves. We can avoid reinventing the wheel if we collaborate together. We can learn from each other and really move that industry up. And, in that sense of the rising tide lifts all the boats that are involved in that industry. So some really interesting opportunities for industrial hemp. Now, we are going to get to the Q&A session, but I just did want to acknowledge that There's a couple of prizes that are going on. One will happen for everybody that registered will go into the draw to win the basket on the left. Well, actually, they're both the baskets. But tonight we do have a spot draw, and we have two tonight because Hemp NZ and Pure Heart Aotearoa have both kindly provided a prize. So if I forget where I put it on the chair now, I think it's on the right-hand side of your chair. If you've got a little post-it coloured tag just on the top of your chair, right on the top. Hold it. Okay. So we have our two winners. Sorry for everybody, you didn't pick the right chair, obviously. So we have two prizes here for those. If I could ask, if you wouldn't mind, it would be my comms people would really love it if you would take a photo, if we could take a photo, and these guys would love it as well. So we'll do it afterwards, so you don't have to grab it now. But so here's here. That's some hemp oil and some hemp seeds. They're going to feel nutritious, aren't they? They're going to feel well filled. Okay, and then the big prize for people that are joining the association, and there is a call to action, and that would be encouraging you to join the association, will be a Hawke and Sandra gift box, and this is some high-end cosmetic uses, again based on hemp seed oil. So it just shows those hemp seed oils moving all the way from nutritional food and even industrial oils. I mean, we didn't really talk about it, but there's lubricants. You know, don't throw out your rancid oil. Clean your leather with it, stain your wood with it. There's lots of uses for hemp seed oil as abrasion. I mean, you can be made into detergents, washing up powder and things like that for your clothes. I mean, this is how much work can be done on some of these products. So the next step, as I mentioned, is to join the association because we're working on a hemp strategy for the industry, capability development plan, which is again some of the information that we're gaining from meetings like this. I'm just going to mention the two sources of information, which is the Callaghan roadmaps that Nicky was kind enough to put up for the seed. There's one for the fibre and there's one for medicine. And Te Puni Kōkiri have some really interesting fact sheets on hemp and growing hemp and some of the returns that you might expect. What we're going to do after this, we were hoping to promote it during the tour, but it hasn't quite worked out that way. But we're creating an online community, a portal that's called Aotearoa New Zealand Hemp Alliance. And as a participant in the tour, you will be contacted and given an opportunity to log on. And it's just a portal that is going to try and help people speed up their hemp journey by putting them in touch with people that are interested in similar products, interested in doing similar things. So we can work on that learning curve and share some information. So it could be a really interesting collaborative tool. So we're hoping that portal could really speed up people's hemp journeys, and that'll be something that will happen after the event. And of course, as the NZHIA, we run a hemp summit every second year. The next one will be in Christchurch in 2023. And that means we're on the opposite year to the Australian Hemp Conference. So there's always something in Australasia there. So we're looking forward to working on that shortly too. So I'd like just to thank our three speakers from the Food Innovation Network, Harvest to Hand and Farmlands. It's great to have you there, and we've captured some videos, and we're streaming it, and we're going to record it, and we'll use that in creating this portal. So we'll create that with your blessing and with you guys to create that profile for those organisations. And of course, the great help that we've had from Hastings District Council, but also Central Hawke's Bay and Napier all helped step in. They were all, the economic development people were all very engaged, and they were all very interested in what we were doing and wanting to help spread the word. So it was really, amazing, contacting these people all around the country, the universities the same. There's a lot of people very interested in the potential of industrial hemp. Obviously, there's a lot of people that don't know much about it as well, but when they get their light bulb moment, they'll be coming to Holleigh to buy all of their hemp oil because they'll be hearing about how nutritious it is. And of course, I've got to thank our sponsors as well, which is a big thank you for AgMart, because we're in this fortunate position of having a little bit of money, which is, you know, in the chicken and egg industry that we represent, it's a bit odd, but we're using it wisely to promote these events and get round to meet you good folk. And of course, our spot prizes today provided by NZ and Pure Heart Aotearoa. And so, one last plug. The executive is going to be really pleased with me when I tell them how many plugs I gave, because it's all about joining the industry. If we can keep in touch with you, collaborate with you, you know, there's a $25 member, a $50 member, and a $100 business member. So that's business, individual, and just a supporting sort of student membership. But even the $25 membership will give you that member email, which contains a lot of very useful information. Example is that chart of the growing area and the number of licenses and the varieties that are grown in each area. So that's the end of that presentation. It's just going to take me a couple of minutes to reset the stage, as it were, for the panel. But if you guys can think of your questions, or if you need a toilet break or anything, now's a good time for that. And then we'll get on to the Q&A. So if the panelists are comfortable, we'll have to bring up some chairs. Okay, so folks, if there's any questions from the audience that we could unpack for you. Did I hear somebody talking about CO2?
Is any figures done as to the absorption of CO2 that hemp, how much it absorbs?
Yes, there has been some work. I could quote you a number of memes on Facebook to tell me with all these amazing numbers. But even the work that came out of Australian Hemp Industries Association, they had a document that I'll share with you afterwards. It didn't sort of speak to exactly it did speak to the number, but it lacked a few references, excuse me. So we do have to do a little bit more work in that space. But I think the short answer is that it would be easy to calculate, because the plant takes on CO2, breathes off the oxygen, you harvest the plant. If you weigh that stem and know how much carbon is in it, that's how much carbon was sequestered. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's in the tons, but the problem is that it's only forestry that's in the emission trading scheme. So you know, we've got to overcome that as well.
Yeah, why not?
It will be definitely something to put in the marketing mix if we can show the farmer that you're. But again, if you're just putting it back on the ground, it's the best, you know, equal. But if you could lock it up in a building material, then you'd be away. But I'll make a mental note, because I do need to be able to say 5 tonnes. But it's, you know, as an accountant, I'm clear that it's all about, you know, it's an art, not a science. So you can come up with just about any number. But it is an interesting one to do. And when we get it scale and all those tonnage are being sent off the farm to that decortication factory or to that fibre plant, then you'll know what's happening there. But I think we need to think about how we can be a complement to other primary industries as well. You know, can we use the food waste from other products to make energy and be, you know, involved in a biorefinery and all these sort of things. So there's a big bunch of work. But if we can be a catalyst for some of that, that'd be great. So the question there, everybody, was about. Sorry, this is for the online viewers, because they can't hear the questions because the mic's just here. So that was just about CO2, but I think I yelled that out to begin that conversation. So we'll try and get it in the right flow going forward. Right, anything to add though, guys, in that CO2 space?
I think it's quite important going forward, because farmers have to sort of offset a lot of their carbon emissions in the coming years. So I think it's, you know, we're trying to think of ways of how we're going to offset, because I think you have to do that in the upcoming years for sheep and beef, you know, in that sector.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of.
So it will be an important number, not just because you want to trade in the emissions trading scheme, but because it's going to help you balance your number.
Yeah.
Equation. Okay.
And I think that'll come with a lot of the other sort of permanent tree and vine crops as well too. We're talking forestry in the agricultural sense in this way, not including fruit orchards, kiwi fruit orchards, vineyards. There's thousands and thousands of hectares of those.
And all those farmers are going to be faced with that requirement soon.
I think so.
What most industries
Know your number.
Yeah.
Know your number, right? Okay, we'll find out a number. I'll email Holleigh and let you know.
Thank you.
How many hemp farmers are there in Hawke's Bay? Anyone know?
Okay. Sorry, I should have had my piece of paper. We've only got those statistics that were on the page on the slide for 2021 because everybody has to do an annual return every year, and that's what we get the official information at. So the question was, how many licence holders are there in the Hawke's Bay? And you're lucky in the Hawke's Bay actually, because it's all done by District Health Board, because we're all controlled by the Ministry of Health, so they break down their numbers into District Health Boards. And in the Hawke's Bay, the number of licensees, it went, so these are from 2018, 19, 20, 21, okay? So in Hawke's Bay, 1, 12, 9, 9. And those are the number of licenses. And of those, most of them would be, they're growing licenses. And there's nobody that's got just a processing license in the Hawke's Bay. And there was one breeding, research and breeders license in 2018, but there hasn't been any research and breeding done since then. So that's the difference in the general licenses, one for cultivation, and the second type of general license, which is the one I have, because I don't cultivate, but I do use the seed. And as Holleigh was saying, the seed is a Class C drug. So to be in possession of the whole seed, you need a license. So the people that Holleigh would take her seed to get dehulled or pressed into oil, that facility, unless it was on the same location where it was grown, would also need a license. But for industrial hemp stems, there is no need for a license because that's automatically a hemp product. So they're not too worried about the stems, as long as it doesn't have any leaf or flowering top on the stems.
What's the issue with the hulls, Richard? Like, why are they so kind of hung up on?
Oh, because it's a whole seed.
Okay.
So the whole seed. So it's a line in the misuse, and so it's a line in the Misuse of Drugs Act that identifies seed. You know, people have said, well, why don't you OIA how many people have ever been busted for hemp seeds? You know, and there wouldn't be many. So again, it's one of these examples of sort of semi-low-hanging fruit where if we could get a review of the regulations, we could sort of talk to some of these points. And when the trials were happening and the regulations came out in 2006, it was always the understanding that it would be reviewed in 10 years and moved possibly to MPI.
Right.
We did try and move it to MPI recently because the food law allowed us to, there's been a change in the regulations that allowed another ministry to administer the Act, or the regulations rather. But when MPI went through it all with a fine-tooth comb and we sat there and we reviewed it all, they said, oh no, we would always have to go back to MOH to ask a question, and that just wasn't going to work because the ministries don't play well together like that, really. So it will happen eventually, because if we can get this review done, then we can really look at how to make it enable the legislation. But in my opinion, we've got world-class regulations. You know, our 2006 regulations is about sort of 39 pages. They're not huge. And all they're there to do is for an agency to issue a license. So if we could get the Ministry of Health to stick to their knitting, they would just issue licenses. And then we would make hemp products, and it would all run well, and we would have an enabled industry. But at the moment, it's not quite like that, because although they say we don't interpret regulations, and then they proceed to tell us what they think about what we're doing, and you know, it speaks to interpretation. So we've got a version of how we read the regulations, which isn't quite in alignment with how the Ministry of Health, who are obviously involved in pharmacies rather than farming, and really have a high threshold for freaked out about safety and things, even though we've shown that we're safe, no THC, even CBD is well tolerated by humans. So it's it's frustrating. But one of these days, that sort of brick wall will just be gone one morning, but it will take some effort. And so in 10 years' time, once we've overcome this chicken and egg scenario and all of those things, then we'll all look back and say, what was all the fuss about? But unfortunately, we're working through that at the moment, and it will take people like yourself in the audience and live stream and people that possibly don't even know about the hemp industry yet to really move forward, move that needle.
Richard, you talked about the animal feed that lost. What was the rationale for that?
Okay, so the question is, why can't we, in a sense, why can't we feed hemp to animals anymore? And the short answer is that there's a perceived risk that CBD or THC metabolites will remain in milk or meat in sensitive export markets. So, and that's, when we said perceived, and then we said to them, well, we can't even give you evidence. We can't even do any studies because you just said no. And they said, yeah, that's it, it's no. But then there's a real risk, there was a product, because we had a risk person address the Industrial Hemp Liaison Group meeting, and they had a risk guy there, and he described a hemp seed oil product that went to, I think it was Singapore, where there's a death penalty for THC. And somebody sort of picked up on it, and it was like far out, it was like, a major, and, a couple of bureaucracies had to be involved to unwind that situation. And if that happened to Fonterra, then, well, we don't want to be the industry blamed for bringing, Fonterra to his knees. So it's a major issue. There are a couple of interesting things in that because it involves production and companion animals. So that's a bugger because, there's a lot of people that treat their fur babies really, really well and would happily buy all sorts of hemp products for their companion animals. The issue, I think, is around horses because they sort of swing both ways in that space. But so quite a number there. But the main problem is when the food code was changed, the tolerance for THC and CBD was put into the food code. But the MPI people at Agricultural Compounds and Veterinary Medicines, which is an act, ACVM Act, they don't have those tolerances. So the argument goes, no, it's zero. And then we say, well, we've got all these tests to show that it's not detected. So, and these are really, because people are getting really good at testing now. So, the decimal points are moving and moving. And they're still saying, no, it's zero. It's a zero molecule approach, and we can't prove that it's zero. So they won't let us sort of even go to the next step. They are hopefully warming. We've been working with, there's a chap at Massey University, and there's a PhD student there wanting to do some work with feeding chickens, because they can understand that one day hemp will be used to feed chickens, and they know that the big chicken people, the first thing they're going to ask is, what's its nutritional value? So they want to do a study in that space. So we're hoping that might be something that we can make a one-off case for, because they should have discretion to allow us to do some things. But as in a farming rotation, as a fodder crop, we would love the hoofed animals to come in and piss and shit and really build up that nitrogen that we could grow hemp in the following year. So as a rotational option, it's a no-brainer. So eventually another one of these brick walls might disappear in time. But that's the story with the agricultural compounds, veterinary medicine, as far as animal foods go. There's more to it, I'm sure. But.
So just to clarify, so does that mean from a rotational crop point of view, you cannot grow it and then rotate through with grass and cows or sheep and beef afterwards?
It's a bit tricky in that space, because when they first announced it, it was like, well, do we have a hemp industry? Because of exactly that, a farmer might have animals go over it a year later. So people aren't sort of asking too many questions in that space, really, but it definitely is an issue. I mean, they could just stop you straight away in the vicinity, but a lot of our arable crops are grown on arable farming operations, so they don't have the same considerations. But for those beef and sheep farmers and things, yeah, that would be an issue. So they'd have to pay attention to it. But generally, so about abandoned plants and things like that. But if they really looked at it hard, and the interpretation they had on the day when they told us that we had no longer had, we nearly didn't have an industry completely. It was like, well, are you going to refund our licenses, or what's going to go on? Because it's just unworkable. at the end of the day. But you know, a lot of discussions need to be had, and this is where we find, you know, the NZHIA volunteer industry. We've talked about the chicken and egg. Well, here's the cart before the horse, because we don't have a multi-million-dollar industry supporting, you know, 4 lawyers to lobby the government. If we did, things would be happening a lot quicker. But even that, I mean, the medicinal people have that, and it's still going quite slow for them. But they've got a review of their regs already happened, and their regs have only been around a couple of years. So we are well overdue for our review.
Just 2 follow-up quick questions. Is it just an annual rotation, or can you get a couple of cycles out of it? That's one question. The second question is water use. What sort of volume of water is required to grow crops?
Okay, so 2 questions about the opportunity to grow more than 1 crop a year and the water use. Over anybody have a shot?
I don't think there's a specific amount of water. Like basically, you just increase the yield that you're getting. I suppose the more water, and like so the sunlight. I suppose those sort of work coincide together. It's frost tender, so there's obviously certain times of the year, like right now, where you wouldn't be able to sort of grow the crop. You potentially could at the end of the year, because it's obviously a short rotational crop, so you could replant it again and potentially get 2 lots off. But again, I don't think it's sort of feasible. You might not get the same. I don't know. To be honest, you might not get the same yield.
No, definitely the yield would be.
Yeah. We rotate our crops.
You can grow hemp on hemp every year, though, won't
you? Yeah.
So hemp,
but like the following season. Yeah.
But it is 1 plant, 1 harvest.
Yeah.
Yes, but can you get 2 harvests out?
But well, here's where it sort of gets a little bit more interesting, because it's a photo day length plant. So as the days draw in, it's going to want to go to seed, and those change in day lengths happen once a year. But you can get, like that finola crop is an auto flowering crop, so that will go to flower after sort of 45, 50 days. Now, if that happened every so as you've taken it all the way to maturity 90 days, you could possibly get one, but what would be the yield? Because the sunlight hours wouldn't be there. The frost, you would have to wait until after the first frost. That's the last frost, rather. As far as the water one goes, man, irrigated crops grow better.
Yeah.
So it's one of those equations. But as long as you get water at the right time, plant emergence, and then maybe somewhere around seeding, then that's going to help with your yield as well. But you're on target for 800 to 1,000 kgs per hectare. That would be from the Hemp Association's point of view, a bit of a rule of thumb if you're doing pretty well. But that in an irrigated farm could be 2 to 3 tonnes. So it can make a big difference. But in the Northern Territories, they are trying to get 3 crops a year, 2 to 3 crops a year. But then they have a different latitude. Like in New Zealand, our latitudes are very similar to the hemp growing areas in Europe. So options for our growers, which have been explored, especially in the south, are multiplying seed for European seed breeders. They can get 2 seasons a year by sending some seed down. It's not as easy to send hemp seed as it is for other seeds. I mean, there's obviously biosecurity issues, so massive amounts of phytosanitary documentation. But because it's cannabis, you've also got to be able to, you need another set of level of compliance as well. But there is an import health standard for it, so it's not impossible to do. But multiplying seed from Northern Hemisphere countries is an option for some growers. And that's why there's a big talk about the seed certification sort of system, because you want to be quite isolated. Those crops need to be isolated 5 to 10 k's. So the assured quality have what they call a SCID system, seed crop isolation distances. So eventually it's likely that our industrial hemp farmers will be registered under the SCID system. So people would know if there's any overlap and be able to have a grown-up conversation about how they're going to handle it. But that's to do again with the pollen issue.
In processing, so you send sending your product to Christchurch, Canterbury to?
No, to Levin, Hemp Connect do all of our processing for us down there at the moment.
Is that the seed or the?
The seed.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about the fibre?
To my knowledge, New Zealand Wool is teamed up to build a factory down in Christchurch alongside a hemp fibre processing facility. So it's gone down there with the hope that I actually don't know where they are.
I can speak to them.
Okay.
Jump in there. Because it's Carfields, which is a big organisation, and Hemp NZ got together and formed a joint venture. So CP Wool on behalf of Carfields and called the New Zealand Natural Fibres, and they imported a production line, and that arrived in COVID when their engineers from the source country couldn't come out and help sort of set it up, but they got it all set up at the mid and running at the middle of last year. So they're producing herd now for our local builders to be able to use, and that geotextile over there, the mulch mat, that's what they're using the fibre for at the moment. I'd love to speak to a little bit more, but when we go down to the South Island trip, the Carfields guys, Craig Carr and Ryan Cosgrove from the factory, they're going to be talking at the Christchurch event and coming down to Timaru as well. So we'll know more about that then. But it's just great to have a decortication line in the country, because it just answers the question, who was going to do it? Somebody's finally done it. But from a scaling point of view, it's a bulky raw material. So freight's going to kill you if you have to send it down. So, we need more decortication units dotted around the country. And as the business plans develop for the products that they can produce, then the actual factory that produces, and that'll be a bankable business plan, that we'll know exactly what we're going to sell our product for, and and it flows back. And the Carfields have really taken a really awesome approach of looking after the farmers and working closely so everybody's making a good return. So it's exciting that fibre industry's come on in the last 2 years, seed in the last 4 years. It's where to next.
It's a mechanical process that breaks those fibres.
Yeah, that's a hammer action. It's a traditional hammer action.
And where does that come from? Where does that machinery that obviously is being used around the world? That's well used and well known technology. The process of decortication is quite well known. Yeah, and there's some amazing companies in Belgium, and there's a guy. People put those components together in a production line, and there's a couple of good examples in Holland and Romania. But the Ukraine, traditional bass crops, lots of decorticate. Well, not lots, a dozen or so in France, possibly less. But the machine that they bought was excellent, in fact. But there's a lot of knowledge there. But it's one of those, people haven't really got into it because people have been using synthetic products. 1938 nylon was patented, so it was like, well, let's use nylon. So as people start looking back and going, well, we want to use that decortication, then there'll be a lot more work happening. That's just the nature of 90 years of prohibition. But when that happens, this is when New Zealanders need to have a look at these machines and go, far out, that's pretty easy, and get on with it. In the past, there's every couple of times a year, I'll get somebody wanting just a handful of the stems like I've got there, just to trial something, to bend it this way or use a different process. But there's all sorts of things we need to understand about retting as well. Do we use the environment? Can we use enzymes? But again, it's all linked to the specification of what the end user wants. That architect wants to specify a product because they know it works in the space, and we need to get that value chain happening so we can produce it the way they want it. But to begin with, people are just going to be blasting into it, and something will come out of it.
Wow.
Did you get some questions online, Richard? Sort of-
Oh, yes.
Some sort of contribution to the
Because it's, you know, it's not easy to forget you guys. Okay, oh, we do. Okay, perfect. Okay, all right, we've got some feedback here. Rachel Duffy, for every tonne of hemp produced, 1.63 tonnes of CO2 is removed from the air. Hemp absorbs 15 tonnes of CO2 per hectare. So now
It's the thing. It's permanent. It's not cycle.
yeah,
It's a cycle, and it's not, you're absorbing it and then you're releasing it. It's got to be that permanent.
so I wonder how that fits in with that know your number scenario then. How, you know, if they could say, if you could lock it up for 2 weeks and it becomes, if you could put it on the ledger. But some interesting numbers. Thank you for that, Rachel. Doing great. Okay. Yeah. And thank you again. Right. Q&A. We've got a question here. Can the product be grown without irrigation? Yes, is the short answer. Because it can be, well, we don't like to advertise it as a weed, really. but because of that, it's a branding issue, guys. We've got to change the narration. You know, people expecting us to say weed, you know, but this is not some aging hippie's dream scheme. It's real, you know, full business. But yes, you know, given a little bit of natural water at the right time of the year, fine.
It's a hardy plant.
That's it. Grows like a hardy plant. But again, because it's an interesting one, because we do talk of the NZHIA, and you know, if, because it comes up often. You know, we need to change the narrative around industrial hemp. People need to hear it and go, just wow, you know, and by producing products and wearing products. Like everything I'm wearing today, I have two looks. I'm going to Massey University tomorrow and I'll be wearing a suit. But today for you guys, it's all hemp. The hemp shoes, hemp socks, hemp jeans, hemp shirt. And, you know, it's like how many people have a hemp garment in their wardrobe? And I asked the question in some cases, and a few people put their hands up, which you would expect in a hemp gathering sort of thing as well. But everybody has wool, everybody has a cotton, everybody has a synthetic, you know. So when I ask that question in 10 years, you'll be wearing, because you will have worn it, and you will know what it feels like to have clothes that wear in, that they don't wear out, that are warm in the winter, cool in the summer. It'll be your favourite garment, so you'll all be wearing it, let alone having it in your wardrobe, you know. And that's the changing point. That's that, you know, reorientation of how we're going to look at, you know, our sourcing of our product. And it's all about the consumers have a massive role to play in this, because they're the ones that spend the money. So if they start supporting our industry, then more people will get involved in the industry.
Is that insulation, that wider, softer thing on the table over there?
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
But when I showed that to some people from Laminates, they said, oh, that's what it looks like just before it's pressed into a medium density fiberboard. So, you know, that same product, which is, you know, this is a low tech really, you know, I mean, you're just realigning the fibres that are coming out when you're producing your herd, can be used in that. In New Zealand, we used to have a guy, Lindsay Newton and Nelson, new wool block insulation in the late 90s, made a New Zealand wool top and hemp insulation batting. And people loved it. People, especially that were refitting old houses overseas, they really liked it because it didn't have all that glass fibre and things like that. But we like to, you know, we want to work with other industries, like the socks I'm wearing, they're possum, merino, and hemp. But in the, you know, there are differences in the fibre, like wool is a protein-based fibre and hemp's a cellulose-based. So one's going to repel a liquid, one's going to soak it up. So you do have some competing issues when you're working together, but I think they can't be overcome with a bit of Kiwi engineering.
Yeah. So that's totally hemp, there's no wool in that?
No, that's totally hemp, those ones. Yeah, they're made out of France, those ones. And again, it's you know, just a factory that was producing herd that was going into the building industry or animal bedding. And the fibre, they were just mixing up and making just into an insulation mat and then cutting those up into pieces. Because that horse bedding, animal bedding has been the main use of the herd. And the herd and the fibre in the paper industry in Europe is quite popular. But again, it's in a specific area of the paper industry. So cigarette rolling papers and Bible papers, because it's long and strong and it works, and they can get it very thin and retain some strength. But I've been talking to people and it's like composites. Okay, well, I want to get away from using glass fibre. And then you introduce them to hemp fibre and they say, well, that's way lighter. And they go, well, there you go. Because again, if you're making an automobile, it's all about weight. Well, some of it's about weight. And if you can have the similar properties, it may lack a little bit of the tensile strength, but even that we need to study more. So start making those composites. I mean, there's people that make a stone type product out of it. It's just, there's some amazing things happening in garages around the world, let alone at scale.
Is there the support in New Zealand to scale the industry up? Like there are lots of people, lots of land that we can grow it on.
Yes, we'd have to agree that there's lots of land we can grow it on.
So is there the support to grow the industry to use it? Well,
this is somewhat of what we're doing the tour to gauge that capability. That's why we need to do a strategy reset. So try and get a shared vision amongst the industry so we can try and get that collaborative approach. Because it's not every day, as you were saying, Nicky, not every day that you come up with a new raw material. So if we could, everything's up for review, all those business arrangements are up for review, how people do business is up for review. If we can get a core group of people that can really make it happen at scale, then I think in New Zealand it can be done. But what industry are you going to be growing for? Who's going to buy it? Because we can grow it, but if we don't know who, there's not a farmer out there that hasn't said to me, who am I going to sell it to and how much am I going to make? Classic questions, but so there needs to be that end use in mind. But that end use might turn around and say, well, I'd love to use your fibre in my pulp paper making machine. And it even just about stacks up, but because I can, tell people it's made out of hemp and I'm sustainable and I've got the, accreditation because of that, I'm willing to give it a go. Can you provide 5,000 tonnes a week, 50,000 tonnes a quarter, And then it's suddenly, well, not at the moment, but give us a few years, because if you're really that serious, there'll be somebody else out there that's got an abundance of money that turns around and says, right, well, I'll plug that gap in the value chain. I'll invest in that processing equipment, because it's that primary processing equipment that's slowing us down. But back to that chicken and egg. But I think if we can get enough people engaged, then these things will happen. And again, it might be that we do a prototype paper run. I used to drop off a whole lot of hemp stems that we used to put through the chipper to the IHC in Whangarei, and they made awesome handmade paper, which then became craft paper, and people put their wedding invitations on them, and scrapbookers loved it because it was something different. Now that's cottage industry, but so how do we get out of, how do we break through cottage industry into that big toilet paper making machine that is going to help us with resilient supply chains if problems happen and we can't get toilet paper.
Yeah.
Those sort of things, There's lots of examples of it, and there's a real call to action for that, because resilient supply chains are really something that we need to be, very aware of and considering. And we can produce a lot of this from a plant that can grow annually. So it's like, well, that's quite exciting. But I think if we can, our problem with the regulatory environment is we just don't have a champion in there. In 2000, when we were trying to raise the awareness, there was Rod Donald, Annette King, Philip DeBunkle. These were politicians that were going, okay, I'm hearing you. I love what you're saying. I think you guys should have a chance at doing what you want, moving forward. And they made it happen. We just can't get that same, or we haven't found one yet in there. But again, we need to try harder. And it's an election year coming up, so next year. So we might have to sort of put it to all the parties and see who's going to be supportive, and hopefully they all do, and then we can hold them to task afterwards. But yeah, we found that when we're dealing with bureaucrats on this interpretation issue that we have, it doesn't trickle up. It just doesn't work that way. But if you get a minister asking a bureaucrat to do something within their ministry, then it happens. So if we had ministers saying, these guys need to, they need to have this working, get on with it, then we'd be going great guns. And it might be that the medicinal people can help us. It seems that there's a lot of energy going into that space, but I think there's some real good crossover and opportunities for all of the industry. And at the end of the day, medicine's a little part of the health and wellness, which is a little part of the food equation, and back to food and fibre. So exciting times ahead for sure. But keep your powder dry as it were too.
Do industries in other parts of the world have similar issues with the regulations and things?
All of them have the same issue. And the animal food one's a really good example of that. We're all happily going on. And as I say, when we were looking at the regulations, CBD, THCA, THC, all these things were considered. And then suddenly CBD got a real notoriety. And now just about most jurisdictions have a problem feeding it to animals now. So we're not doing much studies here, but there are studies happening in Australia and America that will help us to show, some of that factual information. But dealing with regulators worldwide is a major issue for everybody in the industry, for sure.
What countries are most advanced in their regulation and their industry?
Depends on what sort of sector you're looking for. I could say France is, they've never banned, the production of industrial hemp, so they've got 700 years of knowledge around how to use it. So they're pretty, they've got continuity and scale. But the new product development, North America, Canada is really leading the way in some of the areas. But that's not to say that the European hemp industry, their Hemp Industries Association actually is just about to publish a study that they did on CBD to show that it is okay to be used as a food, and therefore what they want to do is try and convince the European community that it was used as a food before 1997, which would make it a traditional food, and it wouldn't have to follow the novel food framework, which is quite arduous. And it's easy to prove. I mean, it's been used for millennia. There's documentation where the monks are eating it as a seed in a soup. So, it's easy to prove, but it waned during that period of prohibition. So it's not a done deal, but the study will help to prove from a scientific point of view, beyond any doubt, that it is safe and therefore should be available in that product. Now, that study, once it is in the public domain, we'll all be able to use that. And there's a International Federation of Hemp Organisations that was formed. There's an interim board running it at the moment, and they'll have their first AGM in November 2022. And we're hoping that will be, and we've supported it as the NZHIA, as the Aussies have, everybody else. And we're hoping that might be a good conduit to share this information that will benefit the whole industry too.
So the hemp for construction, is there much parallels between the forestry products in New Zealand and the byproducts from the hemp stems? I mean, is there anything that would correlate, that could be shared?
So the question was about fibre and the forestry industry and how it relates to the hemp industry for construction.
If there's any sort of correlating developments that, doing more, using more added value to the forestry products in Hawke's Bay, if there is something that could be collaborating here.
Again, it's complementing other primary industries. When we're talking about hempcrete being used, it's often used on site, and you put it into shuttering, and it's a hemp and lime mixed with water, and you tap it down and you remove the boxing, and you've got a monolithic construction. There's your cladding on one side and your insulation on the other. and it's just really healthy and wonderful. That said, though, that when it's used in that way, it's not structural, so you still need the timber to hold your roof up. So there's lots of opportunities there for complementary uses with the timber industry, and and it may be that the medium density fibre boards and things like that, we could possibly add the strength that they need, but they could add the filler at the bottom.
And paper.
Definitely the paper. We would have there's lots of studies done around the benefits of having just even a little bit of hemp especially recycled paper, it goes a lot further. But there's other, roading. Who would have thought you put a little bit of hemp fibre in your asphalt and the asphalt lasts long? It's just those sort of things. But, all it would take is Fort and Hogan to hear that. And there's 10, 15, 20 tonnes, as a trial to get started. And then if they didn't have to dig up the roads quite as often, then everybody's going to be happy. But it's about complementing and things. But I think the forestry industry, it's similar to what you see in the wool. They're really starting to think about how they can add value and get themselves organised. So we're hoping to do the same thing in the hemp industry. But that's pretty good, folks. You've got some really good questions in there. And I thank you as well for coming out, because it's not easy to, on a Tuesday evening in the middle of winter to come and admittedly, it is a very nice facility here at the Havelock North Function Centre, a bit warmer than some of the halls that we do these events in, and acoustically a lot better. But it's great to see you all here. And if there are other questions, let us know, because we can build them into the presentation. We'll put them on that NZHIA New Zealand Hemp Alliance portal, because you're not the only person having that question. I mean, we're all just beginning this journey. Is there anything sorry guys, in the panel, I've done a lot of talking there. Is there anything you would like to question or provide answers to? Happy with that? Pretty happy. Yeah. No, very awesome. Well, I hope everybody sort of got something out of this evening, and I really do thank you all for coming along, because it's great to be able to talk to you about these types of issues, because you need to be aware of that. Because if we can avoid you wasting time, wasting money, and really get up and running quicker, then the whole industry is going to benefit from that. So, I look forward to seeing you at future hemp events and seeing how you're getting on. Okay. Right. Should we end it there?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Awesome, guys.